want to welcome those that are joining us here for our webinar this morning. I want to ask everyone to just read that question there on our title screen of what are your biggest resume and interview questions. And please, as you're getting situated and before we get rolling, any major questions that you may have, just go ahead and drop that into our Q&A or the chat there. We have someone in the background monitoring that information, and we'll be sure to follow up at the end of this session to answer any of those immediate questions that our audience has today. But we'll give it about 1 or 2 more minutes after the hour there, and then we'll get rolling. Still seeing some more coming in, Aileen.
Yeah, awesome. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you this afternoon.
For sure. Got our first question.
Awesome. So we know it works.
Yep, it's working.
Very cool. Okay, we've got more people joining. Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, welcome. You'll see a question here on the slide. As we're waiting for people to join, we'll get started at about 2 minutes after the hour. But just want to get a feel for what are your biggest resume questions. We'll also cover some interviewing tips here during the session. So please pop your questions into the Q&A field, and we'll make sure we get to as many of those as we can.
Nice. They're giving some good ones for you there.
Awesome. There's also functionality here in the Q&A where you can upvote a question. So if you do see a question someone else has asked, and you also have that question, if you upvote that, it will kind of move it to the top of the feed, so that way it'll get prioritized in terms of order. So feel free to use that functionality as well. Really great questions so far.
Oh yeah. They're going to load you up for the end.
That's what I want. That's what I'm hoping for.
Oh yeah. Make our event productive for sure.
Absolutely.
Hey, so one more minute and we'll get started.
For anyone that's just joined,
I have 12:02.
We're going to get started.
Aileen? Yeah, we've got 61 participants now. Again, if you just have joined us, if you haven't heard us announce already, they're on the title slide. We're just asking what are your biggest resume and interview questions, and if you guys would throughout just drop those into the Q&A there, and we have a time allotted towards the end of our event to capture your questions there, and Aileen will be glad to answer those. But I'd like to formally welcome our audience, sitting at 62 participants now. I'd like to welcome everyone to the NC Biotech Career Development Network. My name is Jacob. I have the pleasure of serving NC Biotech as the program manager for Military Outreach and Veterans Engagement Initiative for our transitioning service members. But I'd like to also announce that NC Biotech and Pfizer have developed a partnership to assist job seekers such as yourself to find career pathways into the life sciences industry. Before we dive into the main topic for today, I'd like to take just a few minutes just to highlight some job seeking resources that can be found on our company website at www.ncbiotech.org. What you're looking at here is just a snapshot of our jobs board. It is unique in that it lists only life sciences jobs found here within North Carolina. Our jobs board is very inexpensive for companies, costing only $20 per posting. So what that means for companies is or for you all, is that you'll see a lot of jobs on here that you may not see on the larger sites such as Indeed and Monster. Internship positions can be posted here for free. Additionally, you can also upload your resume and set up automatic alerts based on your search criteria. And then lastly, just want to point out that we have a company directory. It lists every life science company within our state, over 800 plus. This is up to date, and it is fully searchable directory, which provides company information and links to the company's websites. This can be a great tool for researching companies and creating a list of target companies for your job search. And at this time, I'd like to dive into our main topic and introduce everyone to our professional, very well-spoken event speaker, Aileen Wilson. Aileen.
Thank you, Jake, for the very warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you all today, all 68 of you. It's so awesome to see a great turnout. Again, my name is Aileen Wilson. I'm currently working for Pfizer. I am a recruiting manager supporting Pfizer Global Supply, which is Pfizer's manufacturing and distribution arm. I'm responsible for the United States, and we do have 3 sites here in North Carolina, 1 in Rocky Mount and 2 in Sanford. All 3 currently have open roles, so I strongly encourage you to visit our career site and see if anything is a fit for you or if anything's of interest. And also, prior to joining Pfizer, I've been in the HR and recruiting space since 2006. I have always supported manufacturing sites, and majority of those years have been in North Carolina. So what we wanted to do for you today was to give you almost like an insider view, like what goes on the other side, what's going on from the company perspective in terms of recruiting. What are we looking at when we're looking at your resumes? What are we expecting or hoping to hear through the screening and interview process, and hoping to fill in some of those gaps for you. And as we give you information based on what we're looking at on our side, we hope it'll help you to better formulate your resumes and cover letters and things of that nature, be better prepared for the interview. So what I'm going to share with you today, we will follow. I thought that the best way to go through all this information would be to follow Pfizer's hiring process. So I'll give you, again, some insider information on what that looks like. Now, I know that not all companies follow this process, and that's and that's fine. There's so many different ways to handle this depending on the industry and the size of the company. But regardless of the process that the company you're applying for follows, I really hope that this information will be helpful for you. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll start with the very first step in the process, right? You've applied to the role. The very first person that's putting eyes on your application and your resume is someone like me, a recruiter or somebody on my team, right? So I've applied. What happens next? So, and I think I see some of these questions in the chat here already. So I work with what's called an applicant tracking system, or ATS. Most companies do this. It helps for us to organize our applications and resumes in such a way that it's easier to view and understand what steps candidates are at in the process. And additionally, it helps us from a compliance perspective. So most companies that are in a regulated industry will have a system like this to help us remain compliant with different regulations that we might be subject to. Okay, so some of these applicant tracking systems do have some features, and I call them, they could perhaps be drawbacks to it sometimes, which include resume parsing. So what that means is our system is reading your resume, and for me, the system that I use, it actually creates a snapshot of what your application qualifications look like. So it's pulling keywords from your resume onto a screen for me to take a quick look at. From there, I can toggle over to any attachments, which is like your resume and a cover letter, any kind of letters of recommendation or anything that you might add there. We actually have a system that parses in a way that it will actually match keywords from your resume to the actual job description, and it will actually assign a grade, A, B, C, or D, to your application as well. So that's something to note. Some of these systems have a keyword search feature that's available. So for example, if I'm looking for a validation engineer and I've got over 500 applicants, I'm likely not able to look through every single one. So I might keyword search the word validation or the word engineer or the full phrase validation engineer to see what comes up as a match. Sometimes there are pre-screening questions that are there for you to answer, things such as salary expectations, when are you available to start, are you legally authorized to work in the US, do you require visa sponsorship, things of that nature. So as a recruiter, I'm looking at that, and then again reviewing any attachments. So something for you as an applicant to keep in mind, knowing that most recruiters are interacting with a system like this. Be really intentional, and I'm going to talk about this a lot. Be really intentional with what you're putting on your resume, putting on your cover letter. Just kind of keep that in mind. Everything that you're saying is a representation of you. And then also, simpler formatting is typically better because we have, AIs, computers reading your resume. So something that's easier and clearer for that system to pick up will likely be more successful and get your resume through to the next step. Now, I wanted to address a question that comes up often, and I have so many friends, family members, applicants ask me this. Should I do a cover letter or not? So I did want to talk about this. So the answer is it depends. There are different things you want to think about. I'll say in the background, intentionality is what's going to be recurring here. So what are the instances in which you should absolutely do a cover letter? If it's required, you'll see some posting states required. Please do a cover letter in that situation. Second, again, you want to be intentional. If you need to tell us something that's not on your resume, please include a cover letter. This is the time to do that. Two things you want to keep in mind, and again, just some things I've seen over the years. Using Word, you go into Word, there's many templates there. You can Google cover letter templates and so many will come up. You can absolutely use these tools to help you as you're getting ideas for your cover letter. But I also suggest not to use it exactly as is and just swapping your name out. Reason being, I've seen a lot of the same exact templates, and I can kind of tell right away, like, oh, that person pulled this one off of Microsoft Word, or I'll start to recognize them, right? So be unique, make sure it represents you, and just use those templates as guides, not necessarily using them verbatim. The second tip I wanted to mention too is a lot of times you're applying to lots of jobs at once. Make sure that you are customizing your resume, your cover letter as needed. There are times when, let's use that validation engineer example again. I'm looking at resumes for a validation engineer and the person's cover letter says, "Hi, I'm really interested in your continuous improvement associate role." So you can tell they used this for another job and they didn't pay attention to the details of update. So just some things to be aware if you do choose to include a cover letter. Now, not including a cover letter is completely acceptable too, especially if it's not required, right? If it's not required and your resume captures everything you want to say, then hey, that's one less thing you need to do and no need to include a cover letter. So as you're weighing those two options, these are just some things to think about. Right, so let's dive into the resume and formatting. So I've seen some questions around formatting and what works best. So I do have 3 examples I wanted to show you. These are things I just pulled from Canva, so they're not anyone's actual resume. So I wanted to take a look at it. All right, so here's one example. Would love to see in the chat. You can use emojis there. What do you all think about this format? Do you like it? Is this something that you'd like to use? Does yours look like this? Or do you think this is terrible and it's not something you'd like to use? So feel free to pop that into the chat. Be keeping an eye out on that. Just want to get your opinion on this. So for me, again, as a recruiter, I love this format. It is very streamlined. It's easy to look at. I'm looking at hundreds and hundreds of resumes a week. My eye can easily follow this one, right? There at the very top where it says operations manager right here. I do get questions about this too, really similar to the cover letter. Do we need a summary? Do we need an objective? Do we need an opening like this? My answer is, it depends. Be intentional. If there's something that you want to say to open this up, something meaningful, please do it. If you're doing it because you think you need to do it to check a box, don't do it, right? Just make sure it's really organic and represents you. All right. So this is a format that I really prefer. It's easy to look at. It has everything we need here. Okay. So let's take a look at another example. Again, would love to see if anyone's got reactions here. Oh, I just saw something that says chat is disabled. So you can feel free to pop those in the Q&A as well, or anywhere that you can react with this. So what do you guys think about this one? It's colorful, there's a photo, there's a lot going on here. So would love to hear what you all think about this. So again, in my opinion, as someone that looks at lots of resumes, I see a no and too crazy. So again, I think it looks great. It's fun, but two things for someone who looks at resumes all day, I'm just kind of like, where do I go first? There's a lot going on here. And then for you as an applicant, if a system is parsing this or trying to pick this up, these are the resumes that don't get parsed. It basically says NA. It gets no grading because the system is having a really hard time picking up the text from this, right? This could be appropriate if someone's applying for, let's say, a marketing role or a communications type role at a very small firm where someone's going to put eyes on it and you want to really express yourself artistically or creatively. I think this could be a good application, but it looks like Kimberly's applying for an accountant, so perhaps not necessarily needed in this situation. So this is something I personally would suggest staying away from, especially if you're applying for a role at Pfizer. Our system might not parse this. All right. So third and final example, again, would love to hear your feedback on this. This is a really common format that we see often. I'm just
Aileen, as they're posting their comments, I'd like to interject one of our questions from our Q&A because it totally fits right here, I feel like. The question from Joseph Henderson is, any suggestions or preferences for technical skills section? What to include, how to format, structure, or to structure those skills?
Sure, that's a great question, and this is a perfect time to bring that up. So I'm glad you did. So technical skilled. So you can see here on this format, they've got this skills section here, and I think let's just skip over a colorful example and go straight here. This one, okay, this one's got key competencies, but not a technical skills section. So so it's great to add a section that has technical skills, and I would suggest making sure you're tailoring that to the role. So let's say, for example, so let's say I can, I have capability in Canva. I use Canva all the time, but I'm applying for an HR job or a job that might not require that. Like, you don't want to include that. So my first suggestion is look at the job description, and if they're preferring or requiring any kind of technical skills, make sure you put those in there, whether it's systems or some type of capability, including that there. And then if there's anything else outside of requirements or preferences that you have, and you want to include that, that's relevant to the role, please include it. So again, just keeping in mind intentionality and trying to match up to that job description. Okay. Awesome. Hopefully that answered the question there. So I did see some feedback here. I've heard that one column is easier to parse by the ATS. So I agree with that. So here, that's exactly the point I was going to make here. So this is neat, but two things that ATS could get confused with this having the two columns. Additionally, for me personally, as I'm looking at this, my eye is darting everywhere and it's just really hard. Like I have to be able to do a quick scan and clearly get the information I want. That's ideal. Again, looking at hundreds of these a week, that does make it simpler. So, of these three, my preference is this first one or something similar, just keeping it to one column, clean, no images or colors or crazy fonts. Everything's pretty simple here, easy for the recruiter and easy for the ATS to pick up. Okay. Awesome. So again, I did see a lot more questions here, and we'll certainly get those covered towards the end. All right. So after I, as the recruiter, I take a look at those applications, those resumes, and then I shortlist them. Right. So I'll select a few that rise to the top of the list in terms of capabilities match. And I will send those over to the hiring manager to take a look at. So that hiring manager is going to look at my recommendations and they will let me know who they want to move forward with and who they don't want to move forward with. So the ones that they do want to move forward with, I will do a recruiter phone screen on. So again, this is Pfizer's process. More specifically in Pfizer Global Supply. So again, some other companies may not follow this exactly, but again, hopefully it gives you a good general idea. So what happens on the recruiter phone screen? I'll usually ask questions like, tell me about yourself. So I did see this pop up in the chat too. What should you say here? Usually what I'm looking for is just an introduction, because this is the first time we're talking to each other, right? You want to introduce yourself and just say, a little bit about you. At this point, you don't need to dig in too deep in your resume. If they just ask you to tell me about yourself, so you might just say, the reason you're looking for a role, and what kind of job are you hoping to obtain? Why did this one spark your interest? And so that kind of leads me into the next bullet point. I'll always ask, why did you apply? What was your motivation to apply to this role, to apply to Pfizer? So, just be ready to answer that question in a meaningful way. We'll usually also ask for a resume walkthrough, especially if you have a lot of years of experience and you've only got 30 minutes to talk to a recruiter. You have to find a way to make that really concise. So I always suggest, kind of practicing that. How do you reduce that down to a time to really only speak to the bullet points that are really connecting with this role? What do you want to highlight? What do you want to brag on yourself about, right? So those are things you want to bring forward there. We will always ask salary expectation, and this is again some insider information from me. I always want an answer to this question, and I know it's everybody's least favorite question because you don't want to price yourself out, but you don't want to undersell yourself either. But the truth is there is a price point of where you want to be, whether it's you're currently making a certain amount from a base salary perspective and you're looking to at least stay the same or increase, or you're looking for a step up, or you need a certain amount of salary to just survive, right? To support yourself. If you have a family, perhaps you're supporting a family as well. So I always encourage you to answer this question and to be as transparent as possible. It's just helpful for both parties. So my suggestions there, you don't have to say an exact number, but if you were to say, for example, the salary I'm expecting, it's negotiable within this range, and maybe kind of think of what's that min and what's that max. But then you can always add a caveat and say, this could kind of flex up or down depending on what your total rewards package looks like, right? Because that's important. What are the benefits, the paid time off, all those perks? But additionally, you might go into the interview process and learn, oh my gosh, this role is taking on way more than what the job description said. Or you might even say, oh wow, this role is going to be, this is a manager role but doesn't have direct reports. That's amazing. So that might maybe make you a little bit negotiable towards the lower end if it has less responsibility, right? So you're presenting a range, and you're also expressing a caveat, like depending on these different factors, so that way you do have some flexibility to negotiate if and when you get to the offer phase. Okay. And also, please always ask some questions. There's typically time at the end for you to ask questions, and asking questions are beneficial because I'm sure you do have questions first. And secondly, it just shows the recruiter your interest in the role. That you're very inquisitive and curious about whether it's company culture, about the role specifically, things like that. All right. So how do you prepare for this? I always suggest please do your research. So do your research on the company first. You can just Google the company and learn more about their values and things like that. Something else you can look into, so I list here ESG reports. So that's an environmental, social, and governance report that most companies release annually. So, and they're usually lots and lots of pages, but you can usually pull that up, typically a searchable PDF, where you can pull up, different parts that you might want to know about the company personally. If you know people that work there, so if you're applying to Pfizer and people that work at Pfizer, please ask them all the questions about culture and what their experience has been, in other companies as well. And then LinkedIn, I have people that I schedule phone screens with, and they've already looked me up on LinkedIn. I can see that they've looked me up, and that's totally cool. That tells me that they're preparing and they're very interested in the role. Study that job description, make sure you've gone over all the bullet points, and this can help you come up with your questions, right? If there's anything in that job description that's unclear, or anything you want to know more about, make sure you ask that. And then always practice. I know it might seem a little weird talking to yourself and just going through your intro, but the more you say it out loud, the more you're kind of working it into your muscle memory, if you will, right? That verbal memory. So practice a few times before you have the call. Okay, so
Aileen, that's a perfect segue to a question that's gotten a lot of hits here from Tess Anderson, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so from Tess, she's asking, what the best way to introduce yourself to the hiring manager after you've submitted an application? What questions can you ask that might precede an interview?
So introducing yourself to the hiring manager, or do you mean kind of, and I don't know if you can gauge this from the question, Jake, but does it sound like we're trying to reach out to the hiring manager before the interview?
No, I'm taking it as more the maybe even the recruiter phone screen piece is just that I think they're really getting after that the elevator pitch, right? As far as that first snapshot of hey, this is me type thing.
Yeah. So there are a lot of different ways you can do this, and I would say the important thing is to be concise and make sure you're highlighting. Like, you don't want this part to be like 10 minutes, right? You want to be concise. And so, for example, the way I might introduce myself would be, my name, my current position. I have 17 years of HR experience, be really broad, and then perhaps highlight pieces of work that you've done that closely relate to the role. So let's say I was applying for a project manager role. I'd say, I've been in HR for X years, and I have managed several projects such as, right, and highlighting those. And then also closing out, like the nice bow on that is the reason why you're really interested in this role. Like, I saw this role, and it's a project management role, and I have really enjoyed my time leading these different projects, and I've seen success and find this work really rewarding. So I am really interested in this role. I'm very excited to talk to you today, right? So you don't have to go into all the detail about all the points in your resume because you'll likely get to that later. And also I would not suggest saying things like, hey, I'm married, I have 2 kids, they're 5 and 9, and even though that is something about yourself, you have a really limited amount of time and you want to just talk about what's really relevant to the role. I think that answers the question, Jake.
Absolutely. I think
All
you hit the nail on the head. I appreciate that. Thank you.
right. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the question. All right, so recruiter phone screen, once this is done, I send notes to the hiring manager. I just kind of go through what were the answers to my questions, and I'll typically make a recommendation like, hey, I think this candidate is a really great match. They have strong verbal communication skills. They have familiarity with XYZ systems. They're a confident speaker, and I would recommend moving forward. So I'll say something like that. Or on the flip side, if it's not a fit, I might say something like that too. But the hiring manager ultimately has the decision who they want to move forward to interview, right? So they make those selections. And here at Pfizer, we do panel interviews. So we'll have about 3 or more interviewers. We like to not go over 3 because that gets a little bit overwhelming, but at times you will have more. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the way Pfizer does interviews and what to expect there. And I do think, again, all the different companies have their own processes, but hopefully this will resonate regardless of where you're applying to. So what to expect during the interviews are really similar to the phone screen. There are some same elements. Basically, introduce yourself, resume walkthrough, and what was your motivation for applying. Something that we do at Pfizer and something that a lot of companies do now are behavior-based questions. So if you're not familiar with these questions, what they are is they'll ask you something like, tell me about a time that you had to manage conflict. Tell me about the situation and how you resolved that. So what companies are trying to glean from these types of questions is just we want to know how you handled situations in the past, and we think that gives us insight into how would you fit into this role, and do your actions or behaviors align with the company behaviors. So what we're looking for there is, if you haven't heard of the STAR format, I wanted to present that to you today. What the STAR format is, it's a method in which you would respond to these types of questions by ensuring that you cover the situation, talk about the situation or task at hand. So that's the S and T. The A is the action. What is the action that you took? And then R is the result. So make sure you close out with what was the resolution to that situation. So if you keep that STAR format in mind, you'll be able to answer these questions with completeness, the way the interviewers are looking for. So a common error, or I don't really want to say error, but sometimes when we see candidates not answer these questions completely, they're using more of a hypothetical situation and not talking about something specific that happened to them in the past. So for example, with the question that I use there, tell me about a time you experienced conflict. They're like, someone may say, oh, well, when I've had conflicts before, I just like to make sure I talk to people and make sure everyone is on the same page before we move forward. So that was more of a hypothetical, right? We want to hear more about what was that situation or task. So perhaps it was a project you worked on. Perhaps it was a situation with a team that you lead. What was the situation? What was the action that you took? And then also what was the resolution? So just keep that in mind, and then also ask questions. As I mentioned, in the phone screen, really similarly, do your research, make sure you've got questions, whether it's about the role, about company culture, about something you saw in the job description, about something you heard in the interview, right? Ask for that clarity. As you're preparing for that interview, if it's virtual, make sure you're testing all the tech. You should know if it's a Zoom interview, if it's a WebEx or Teams video, things like that. So just make sure you're aware of what platform it's on and make sure you're testing it out. You can test it out. Let's say it's on Teams. Pfizer uses Teams. Let's say you download that Teams app on your phone. You're going to use that phone. You could just ask a friend or a family member or someone you know to test that out with you and make sure it works. There are times, I don't know that all recruiters do this, but I know there are times that I've test tech with someone who's interviewing just to make sure everything works fine. Okay. Plan what you'll wear, especially, if it's a phone interview and you're not seeing each other, that doesn't apply. But if it's on screen or in person, just make sure you have that prepared. Not all roles, require a business formal, but I'll say, if you don't know what to do, getting overdressed in that suit is always better than underdressing. You can always ask your recruiter too. I've had people ask me that as well, and that's acceptable. What's the expectation around or dress code for this interview? Okay. Again, doing your research on the company and the interviewers. If it's a panel interviewer, you can always look them up on LinkedIn. Studying that job description and practicing as well. Okay. So after the interview process, what's happening is most of the time we'll have 3 or more people interviewing for the role, and once those are all complete, the hiring manager has what we call a debrief meeting, and all the interviewers are coming together and talking about the aspects of the interview, the pros and cons, and then again, at Pfizer, our process, the hiring manager is ultimately going to make that final decision on the candidate using the feedback from all of the panelists, and from there we determine who we're going to move forward with to the offer phase. So just a little insight into offers and what we look at on the back end here. Pfizer always does a verbal offer before we do the written offer. Some companies go straight to written, but make sure when you're receiving this offer, don't be shy about asking all of your questions, right? This is a huge life change for you if you're changing jobs or starting a new job. Certainly not something to be taken lightly. Make sure you have the full understanding of the benefits package, time off, retirement. If it's requiring you to locate, making sure that you understand that relocation package or that they're offering one, right? So if it's not something that comes up, it doesn't hurt to ask. Take the time you need to decide. We're never expecting you to answer us on the spot when we offer you verbally. So taking that time, but not taking too long. There are sometimes people ask for 2 weeks to answer, and that's tough for us because the company needs to make the decision. But I know sometimes have that delay because they might have other offers in play. But please be transparent with that, because it helps us to kind of justify to the hiring team the reason for you needing more time, right? So we do have a lot of people that say hey, I thank you so much for the offer. I do have I am expecting another offer later this week, so I would like to consider both offers. And that's pretty standard, especially in this market. A lot of people are hiring, so we do see that happen quite often. Okay, so that is the end of my content here. I know we do have a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm excited to go through those with you. So Jake, I don't know if you have some they're ready for me.
Yeah, I do for sure. But I'd also like to just remind our audience. So there's some really good questions in there, but I don't know that we're going to have time to get to all of them. So I'd really like to, Aileen and I both would really like to kind of prioritize those questions. So if you all would, as she's going through answering a few of these, just kind of canvas a few of those. And if you like that, if you have that similar question, just hit that thumbs up, and it's I've got them to where they'll sort to where we can kind of prioritize those questions there. But Mia poses a great question. I'm sure we have a few interns that have joined us, and she asked, as someone wanting to enter the field with just internship experience, what resume what resume will get me noticed for an entry-level position?
Yeah, that's a great question. So so in terms of format, again, I always just suggest something simple. The one that I showed doesn't have to be the exact one you use, but something simple. Still go with that. I think just ensuring, so something that I've noticed, and I have done hiring a lot for entry-level roles and even for internship roles. So make sure that you're selling, like don't be afraid to sell the things that you've done in your internship, and also highlighting group projects or anything that you've worked on during your time in school. There's several projects that you can likely, this is where studying the job description is really important. There's several projects you can likely make connections to the job description to show your skill set. And to be honest, when they are entry-level roles, we are looking for someone who's only had internships, right? We're not expecting someone with prior experience. So what are the ways that you can highlight your aptitude and your capabilities? So just making sure you're listing out those things. Even relevant coursework, I've seen people highlight. So if there are certain classes that you've taken that have covered content that are required of the role, just kind of highlighting relevant coursework and listing out the different topics covered that are relevant. I think whether you are first starting out, you're newly graduated, or if you are changing industries or changing the type of role you want to be in, this is where a cover letter is really helpful, right? You can talk about where you've been and where you're looking to go and the reasons why, and highlighting why this is a good match for you.
That's perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I've got another one for you here that's gotten several hits, and I think it's pretty solid. This is from an anonymous attendee.
Yeah.
How should you address an employment gap on your resume?
So I think what you do, and it depends, right? If it's an employment gap because like you went back to school or something like that you can plug it there, then you can certainly add that just in terms of or perhaps cover that in a cover letter, and just kind of and I've seen that, and it's been really helpful when I've seen that in a cover letter, like I do have this gap, and this is the reason why. If you have a gap for personal reasons, that's not something that you would necessarily want to list there unless you feel comfortable. It depends on the situation. I have people that have gaps, like for example, they were taking care of parents that were in poor health, or different things like that. If it's something you feel comfortable explaining in a cover letter, then do so. But I will say, from a recruiter side, this is a hot topic in terms of training for us too. Because I'll say in the past, like many years ago, employment gaps are something that was previously frowned upon, but I'll say in more recent years, we as recruiters are being really encouraged to not make assumptions about gaps, and it's something more that you might talk about during a phone screen, because life happens to everybody, and things happen, and gaps happen for different reasons, and it doesn't make somebody not a good match for the role. It's just something we ask about.
Hey, that's awesome. I've got another one for you here. So Ashley Nicholas is asking, and this one's gotten like seven different hits. So
yeah.
So for the biotech industry, what is the page limit for a resume?
There is no page limit. This is where I say to be intentional. There are a lot of people that are trying to put I'll say back in the day, they're like, keep it to one page. But I think that's like when you were mailing a resume in, or like actually turning it in. But now that we have these electronic systems that manage things, I think your resume should reflect your experience. If you've got a 20-year career and you're only giving me one page, it's like your font is going to be like 3, right? So just do what's right for you, but there is no limit.
Okay, perfect. So Tess has loaded us up again, and she's got an 8 hit. So I'm gonna show her
Yeah.
some level again on this one. So when you're lacking specific skills that the job is asking for, but you're a quick learner, how can you sell yourself despite not knowing those skills?
That's a great question. So something that we look at, especially for, I got one of these roles today. It's a really niche role around, it's focused on temperature controlled shipments, right? So it's kind of tough to find people with that type of experience, but we are looking for transferable skills. So thinking about your skill set and the things that the things that make you, so you're a quick learner. What are the examples of things that make you a quick learner? Like, how can you tell somebody, or not necessarily quantify, but describe? Like, if you were to tell me what, like, you're a quick learner, all right, give me an example of that. You could mention that in a cover letter, right? Like, I don't have, like, I believe you might not want to come right out and say, I don't have experience in XYZ, but you might say, hey, I've done this kind of work and I'm a quick learner as demonstrated by XYZ. Therefore, I feel that this would translate really well into ABC skill set, if that makes sense. Like, you want to tell them why. And it's really marketing and advertising for yourself, right? How are you going to sell yourself to somebody else reading this about you? So it's something that we do look for. Sometimes we're not looking for exact matches, but if you can tell me the reason why you can do this, even though you haven't done it before, I am all ears and I'm ready to hear about it.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So this one here is from Leslie Freeman. When you have a pool of favorable candidates, what is the strongest factor for the person landing the job after the interview? Is it who interviewed the best or the candidate's recommendations?
Or the candidate's recommendations. Is
Or
there
the interview board's recommendations is what I take from that.
Sure. So it's so definitely the interview panel's recommendations is important, but that usually translates into who. So when we say who interviews best, I'll say we're looking for a fit and for a connection. We're looking, especially at Pfizer. So Pfizer, we have 4 values, right? And I know that a lot of companies have their value statements, but for Pfizer, ours are so ingrained in literally everything we do, and even our interview format follows this, right? So it's our 4 values are excellence, equity, courage, and joy. And what we're really looking for are for the people that hit on those 4, and we make a connection with, right? It's who are we able to have a good conversation with? They're someone who's able to present themselves well. So when we talk about somebody interviewing well, it doesn't necessarily mean they answered the question the way I wanted them to, if that makes sense. There's not any one right answer to a question. We're looking at that relationship, that connection, and who do we feel is best representative of our values at the end of the day. And joy is really one of them too, right? Just someone who understands that, and it's a different value. A lot of companies don't have that, but it is very important to us. So someone who understands the value of enjoying everyday gratitude and recognition. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I hope it helps.
No, I feel like you did. So, and as a recent job seeker, I think I can answer that. Lucy asked, will we get a copy of the recording for this session? And I just asked our tech team that question, and yes, we will. Yes, we'll provide a copy to the audience so you guys can review and take notes on a few other items if needed. And let me scroll back up to the top here, Aileen. I'll be sure to ask another one.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. Should one customize resumes for different positions, or is it okay to share one great version as like a master resume?
So that's another it depends question. So I think I would suggest customizing it because again, there's that parsing feature, and if there are certain terms within the job description that aren't mentioned on your resume and you have those experiences, you want to make sure that they're there. But if you do have one great version, if your great version does match the jobs you're looking for, then feel free to continue to use it. But if you if you do have the capability, it's a huge advantage if you are customizing it to each job.
That's perfect. Caitlin asked, and this one's gotten a few hits as well. Is it an issue that the first example of the resumes that you presented, is it an issue that it is more than one page? I think you've already kind of answered that one, but I'll let you hit that again if you like.
Yeah, definitely not an issue. Again, as long as it's intentional and you needed more than one page to say what you needed to say, by all means, go ahead and do it.
Cool. Hey, so we're going to take about five more minutes for continued questions here. So we've got a lot of participation, which as a presenter, it makes myself and Aileen very excited. So it seems like you all are very engaged. Next question for you, Aileen, is if you are applying and not getting interviews, even though you're qualified, what can that imply? And what do you have to do to overcome this obstacle?
That is a great question. So I would suggest taking another look at your resume and your cover letter if you have one, and just making sure those are matches, because sometimes you're qualified, but those keywords might not be hitting, or maybe perhaps your resume isn't representing you in the way that you need to. So I would say, if you need to revamp that or just try something different from that perspective, if you're not even getting to a recruiter interview phase, that would be my suggestion. Something else you might want to consider is, if you've listed a salary expectation, some applications ask that, you might be pricing yourself out, at that point. Which is fine if that is truly your expectation, then that's not the job for you. If that's what you need, but that might be something you might want to consider as well, maybe listing a range, if you do have more flexibility.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I got another one from an anonymous attendee here.
Sure.
The question is, if the interviewer does not bring up salary expectations, is it appropriate to ask what the salary is during an interview?
So I would suggest asking that from the recruiter, not necessarily the interviewer. Yeah, if it's not brought up, you can certainly ask what's the range. And they may or may not answer that depending on the company's policy.
Okay, thank you for that. This one's easy. You ready? This is a two-part answer here. So I'm gonna give you an easy one here.
Yeah.
Is it better to submit the resume in a Word document versus a PDF format?
I will say PDF is better. There's some systems. So one of the systems I work with, so we actually have two systems that work together in terms of an ATS. And one of those systems for Word documents, it makes the formatting weird on some of them. I don't know, there's certain templates that it just kind of makes it look crazy. So, but if you're PDFing that document, there's no, like, that's not going to happen. It's going to show up just as is and just the way that you want it to. So PDF is the way to go.
Awesome. And one salary range tends to be the topic of today.
Yeah.
If there's a good theme, that's definitely going to be it. But Melissa poses another question regarding, it's got like 6 hits, so I definitely want to ask.
Yeah.
I was told to never provide a salary range in the beginning of the process, as when, even if the responsibilities change during the interview process, because you already provided a salary range. They will never change that range, as you already said you were fine with that, even though the new expectation should provide a higher salary. Do you have any comments for that?
So I have heard a lot of advice on this, and again, this is just my personal experience. So if somebody says the salary expectation, I'm generally expecting it to be there. But if during the offer phase that candidate says like, hey, I know I initially said this, but as we went through the interview process, I learned that the responsibilities included XYZ, which was unclear to me at the beginning, so I'm really excited about this opportunity, but my salary expectations are more like here based on that. And I strongly suggest, when you give salary expectations, that you even add that caveat, right? To say like, based on what I know today, this is the range I'm negotiable between, but this is going to depend on total rewards, the benefits and all that are very important to me. So that could adjust. And then additionally, I know that I may learn more about the role during the interview process that could potentially change what that range is. So I don't see any concerns with saying that up front. The problem with not giving salary expectations up front is that there are times that we've made it through the interview process. You've gone through panel interviews, several iterations of different things, and we get to the offer and we like absolutely can't make a connection. And it turns out that, this is a senior manager level role and you're really wanting a director level role. And if we had hashed that out in the beginning, we could have referred you to director level roles instead of spending time in the senior manager level role. So it's just really hard. To be honest, it's really heartbreaking when we get to the end. We're all usually really excited about that person starting with us and, ready to go. And then we absolutely can't make a connection. So, that's one of the reasons why I suggest doing it. Again, it's about intentionality. If you don't feel comfortable talking about it, then you shouldn't. But just from a recruiter perspective, it's just way more helpful to know that up front. There are times when I've had that exact example, like people have been applying to these senior manager level roles, but they're really looking for director level. And I've been able to refer them to those other roles, and we're able to make that work out. So everybody's happy at the end of the day.
Awesome. I'm gonna toss one more your way, and then if you want to provide any closing comments, and then I'll close this out announcing our follow-on event. If you have 2 candidates equally at the same level, but one requires visa sponsorship, would they be in a disadvantage for that job?
So I wouldn't say it's at a disadvantage. There are different, the way that Pfizer handles visa sponsorship, it is on a case-by-case basis. So we do have, because there's so many different types of visa sponsorship, and there are so many different types of roles. So if we do know that someone requires visa sponsorship and they're the candidate we want to move forward with, we engage. We do have a resource, a counsel on our team that handles all the immigration things really specifically. So we connect with him. But in our eyes, the candidate we want is the candidate we want. So we have those conversations to see if we can make it work.
Aileen, you've been amazing. I know we've gotten a lot out of you in the last 57 minutes here. So we thank you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule, following a vacation, mind you. I'm sure your email is backed up quite significantly. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to reach out to the job seekers and to our audience here to try to help them out. I want to announce real quickly that our next event will be held August 14th from noon to 1 p.m. It'll be a similar format, or it will be a webinar, and we'll be focusing on how to communicate your value to companies as you transition from the military. So this is really geared towards an audience, transition service members, veterans, military spouses, guardsmen, and reservists. So if you are one of those, please, as a transitioning service member myself, I hope to add value to that conversation with Aileen. But if you are you fit into one of those categories, please join us for that event. But if you are not, please share that with someone who might be, because we definitely want to take care of our military community to ensure that no one falls into that unemployment gap. But I want to go around the horn one last time. We got 2 minutes. Heesuk, do you have anything you would like to provide?
First, I would like to thank to Aileen and Jake on behalf of Susan Langford, who is the organizer of this monthly event. I think it went so well, and I was so happy to read such a fruitful questions and all those good answers to them. This is just the beginning, and I think when people have more questions, please let us know. We will go through with Aileen. If we can get some other answers, some other advices, then we will share them with you guys. And all the good luck, good wishes for all those job seekers. And thank you so much. And I also want to thank to Hannah and Sean, who is providing strong support to make this event to be successful and smooth. So thank you. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Heesuk. Aileen, any closing comments?
I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you for having me. I hope that you found it insightful. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you're there. We're happy to help you build your network.
For sure. Aileen, I'm going to give you a virtual fist bump. Okay. Awesome. Hey, listen, you all have a fantastic week. Good luck with your job search. And by all means, again, we will provide this to you all as an audience so you all can go back and take any notes to add to your search. So thank you again for attending. Hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Aileen, could you please stay for a short time, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Yeah.
And Jake
Absolutely.
as well. Thank you, guys. Bye. We're checking people are leaving, so getting there.
Man, that's a good family. Literally. Oh, we still got
Yeah.
people. Oops.
Was
So you know I'm on vacation. My son just called me from Subway. Dad,
Yep.
what do you want to eat?
yeah, you gotta go. You gotta go. So
No, I'm good. I'm hanging out.
They're bringing you
We still
lunch,
got, we
so
still
you're
got
good.
6 on there. 5.
thank you. Oh yeah, it's still 5 people are leaving. Yeah.
Hey, it's just us now.
That's
It's
it.
just us.
Yes.
Yep.
So thank you so much. It went so well. And 78 participants and 61 questions, and they've made quite good questions.
No,
They
they did.
were really good questions. I wish
Really
we could.
good questions.
Yeah.